everyone. Welcome back to another installment of our Inspiring Voices series. I'm sure by now you have truly been inspired. I hope so. Comment below if you have been inspired by this series. I know that I have. And this is our final installment. I'm sad, but super excited for you all to head over to YouTube and catch up if you haven't. Because listen, all of these ladies have been amazing. Today is no different. Y'all know what we do over here. This platform amplifies women's voices that receive a lasting impact. And today I'm honored to be joined by Cierra Michelle Jones, who will share her journey and inspire our audience with the power of her story. Thank you for joining me, Sierra.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. I am too. So let's just jump right in. I don't waste no time. Let's jump right in. Can you share with myself and our audience who you are and the experiences that shape the voice that you bring to the world today?
Absolutely. So I am Cierra Michelle Jones. I am affectionately known as the Credit Lady. I got started with my journey as becoming the Credit Lady in 2019 after having some challenges that prevented me from obtaining home ownership. But prior to that, I did 15 years in the Army, and I am the mom of a teenager who is going to be going to high school this year. So I think for me, for my experiences to shape my voice, being a single mom, being a female Army veteran in such a tumultuous time in our climate, in our world, and then championing financial literacy to not only just millennial families, but the Black community is what definitely shapes my voice and keeps me going and helps me to inspire others.
I love that. I love that. And girl, that's a lot of hats. That's a lot of things that, all those different aspects of life bring their own challenges. So
Yes.
I was a single mom for 16 years. And listen, you talk about being in the Army, but listen, sometimes it felt like being a single mom was in them trenches. So
Listen.
I love that you were able to pivot and to, become what you are now and the journey that took. What values do you think that you gained early on that still guide you today through going through those times of being in the Army, and also raising your children?
I always like to call myself an eternal optimist. My
Mm.
dad used to use this term called glass half full. And I really like to think of life like there's always the narrative that while the glass might be half empty, the glass is half full. So I'm always an eternal optimist, if you will. And I know there's I think the new kids today they say delusional or delulu, but I I always have this mantra, and I even write it on my journal. It always works out because it's worked out before. Like even
Mm.
when there are times when we have challenges and they look like maybe they could be the darkest of times. I try to remind myself there was a situation where it worked out before and it always works out. So I try to just keep a positive perspective. I try to just be that internal optimist, and I try to just, even when I want to go off the handles and be like, okay, God, I'm tired of being the strongest soldier now. I still remember that He does everything for our good, and that is what keeps me grounded.
I love that. What's I say? If he did it before,
He'll do
he
it
can
again.
do it again. And that's so true. And I love that. I'm taking that. I was gonna say still, but I'm gonna borrow the internal optimism. I love that. And it's so funny that you mentioned that because just yesterday, and I'm gonna look down because I'm looking at it to make sure I get it right. But just yesterday I changed my wallpaper and it says never think you are too good for anything. Never
Mhm,
think that you are too good for the best. Never think you are too
mhm,
good for anything. If you want it, you can have it. You can go and get it. And I love that because when you couple your faith in God and the journey
mhm,
and the will that He has for your life, in addition to that self
mhm,
will and determination, with that positive thinking, you literally can achieve some of the most unimaginable things. So I
mhm.
love that you touched on positivity because in order for us to be inspiring and to live inspiring lives, we have to have a little we have to have positivity, especially in the world
Mhm.
that we live in. We can't be pessimistic and be Oscar the Grouch. We have to have something to look
Exactly.
forward to. So
Mhm.
I love that. Was there a pivotal moment that transformed your journey, and if so, how did you navigate that?
A pivotal moment in my life that transformed my journey would definitely be being diagnosed with cancer while being pregnant. Um, it was definitely a journey. I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer um, when I was 21, but my daughter
Mm,
was 3 months old. So I had my daughter in January. I was diagnosed with cancer in March. And the same time they diagnosed me, they were like, "Oh yeah, you have to have emergency surgery." And I'm like,
mm,
and so now my daughter is being rocked in the waiting room by my parents, and I'm now going into a 6 hour emergency surgery, which then translated into me now having to do radiation and not being able to see or touch my child, which then
mm,
translated to now I'm on a medication for the rest of my life to be able to sustain that thyroid hormone. So it's definitely had its share of challenges, but one of the things I'm grateful in the experience is that someone saw fit to tell me that they saw something wrong. I know a lot of the
mm,
times we deal with people and they want to kind of, say, well, everything's going to be okay. But sometimes you need the people in your life to say, I think something is wrong. And so I had a
mm,
chaplain while I was in the army, and she said, because I think I was like, I was way smaller than I am now. I won't give numbers, but um, she said, I think there's something wrong with your neck. And I was like, well, what's wrong with my neck? But unbeknownst to me, I had been struggling with breathing. I had been having issues with keeping my breath. And I just so happened to go into the doctor for a migraine. And I later came out with two goiters, 4 centimeter goiters that were compressing my trachea at that time. And so I learned perseverance through that moment. I
mm,
learned that even before that, losing my son, I had went through
mm,
a staple of situations that I even told God, this is beyond my magnitude. God, I don't know which list you have me on, but I would just appreciate if you will stop putting me on the strongest list, God, because from my son passed away a year prior, and so that was kind of like a trajectory that I had to say, God, I know that in this moment it doesn't look like it, but I just trust you more than enough that you would not have me birth this baby only to not know what could possibly become of it, even though I'm a single mom. So that definitely like shifted me in a way
mm.
that made me pay more attention to my health, made me pay more attention to my life, and definitely restored my faith.
Girl, listen, I'm over here like, whew, the ability to say, God, I trust you
Hmm.
in the middle of the most challenging, you're grieving still, you
Hmm.
are just brought life into the world. And
Hmm.
so as women, we know it takes a while for us to really recover and heal mentally and physically. And
Hmm.
now they're dropping the bomb of this diagnosis on you.
Hmm.
And to still be able to say, Lord, I trust you. You wouldn't have brought me this far to leave me.
Right.
That is impactful. And that is an encouragement to me. And I hope an encouragement to our audience that even in some of the worst situations, to still
Hmm.
be able to say, Lord, I trust you. I believe that God is like, I believe that's one of the reasons why you're still here. Because
Yes.
it takes a lot to say that. And I just believe
Hmm.
that God is like, wow.
Yes.
Like, because how many of us would have been like, oh, I'm telling you now, I would have been in the flow somewhere in a fetal position. Y'all have to come pick me up. Okay. But for you to say, Lord, I still trust you, that is
Hmm.
dynamic. And I
Hmm.
hope that we can all be encouraged as we're going through our journeys, especially for those of us who are called, because people often see the end result, but they don't
Hmm.
see what it took to get there. And we got
Exactly.
to just keep saying, God, I trust you. I don't know
Hmm.
how this vision is going to happen. I'm dealing with this at home. I'm dealing with this in my
Hmm.
marriage. I'm dealing with this in my health. But God, I
Hmm.
still trust that you call me to this place and you're going to make everything work out for my good. I love that. I've already been inspired. That's beautiful.
Hmm.
What are the most important lessons you've learned from your journey, and how can others apply them in their own lives?
I think one of the most important lessons that I've learned in my journey is boundaries. A lot of people like, I think that's the word of 26, but boundaries with yourself is also
Mm,
important. We factor in boundaries with other people. We don't factor them into ourselves. And so having that boundary to say, you know what, God has brought me to this point. The least I could do is take 5 minutes to read his word today. God has woke me up this morning. The least I could do is, say thank you, Lord, and submit a prayer to him. It's, I often think back to the scripture that says the least of thee. And
Mm-hmm.
when Jesus talked about, excuse me, the least of thee. And I try to kind of permeate on that thought that the least I could do is set a boundary within myself with God bringing me through so much, the least I could do is return the favor and give him thanks after all of his grace and his mercy. So that definitely a self boundary for myself, but also not getting into the pessimistic mindset that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because situations get worse. I was telling somebody I am in the thick of a crisis right now, and as much as I wanted to curl up in a ball and say, you know what, I'm just going to cancel everything on my calendar, I still have to show up because there are people that still need to hear what I need to say. There are things that
Mm-hmm.
God is still doing within me, and that He will get the glory after this. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
just reminded that in that moment, to not allow thoughts and those pessimistic thoughts to absorb me, but even putting that boundary on myself to say, I'm not going to allow that thought to win in this moment. I'm going to keep pressing forward. Even if I have to cry, even if I have to scream, I know that this moment is temporary, and not allowing those temporary emotions to justify permanent decisions.
Listen, that's it. I love that. Boundaries with
Mhm.
yourself. Because we harp a lot on boundaries with other people and we
Mhm.
quick to tell people what they cannot and should not be doing when it
Mhm.
comes to us. But I don't think we focus enough on ourselves. And I'm just telling somebody that's what the season that I'm in currently. I'm in a
Yes.
season of checking Angela, checking my ego, making sure, like
Mhm.
you said, that the least I'm doing to say thank you to God is showing up,
Mhm.
being faithful, being committed, giving when I feel like this is sacrificial and I don't really have it, but just
Mhm.
trusting him enough or saying thank you enough in my actions. My husband always says, when I say, because I'm on a health journey and I've been really strict with myself about what I eat and what I drink. And so
Mhm.
I have a day where I say, well, I want some ice cream so bad today, but I didn't do it. I had my protein yogurt. And he'll say, you defeated yourself. And at first, I didn't really understand that, but you really have to tell yourself no. You really have to tell that flesh, no, you're not getting no
Mhm.
ice cream today, or you're not going to lay in the bed all day. You're going to do
Mhm.
something today that your future self will thank you for. And I love that. Boundaries with oneself. So, how can we all use our own stories to inspire, influence, and make positive impact?
I think one of the most important journeys that God has taken me through, even with the credit school, is God took me through a lesson and I did not understand it. And He's been taking me through this lesson for 2 years, y'all, because I am hard headed. But He took me through a lesson and He kept saying, use what's in your hands. And I was like, God, what are you talking
Mm,
about? And he was like, use what's in your hands. And I'm a person that gets shiny object syndrome. So I'll create a business, put it down, create a business, put it down. And I kept saying, I was like, I'm too, I was laid off right after I had bought my house, and I was too ashamed to even run. Back then it was a different credit name. I had Michelle Financial Group, and I was like, God, I can't teach people about credit, and I'm over here trying to DoorDash to pay to pay my bills so I could sustain this house. And I didn't understand what he was saying because, God kind of sometimes speaks to us in parables. And he was like, use what's in your hands. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I kept trying to start these different businesses. I kept trying to do these shortcuts. Everybody's doing a course now. So I was like, well, I'm going to make a course. And I was like, that's not my passion. And so I remember him saying, okay, well, you're not getting it. So let me explain this to you. And
mm,
he said, when I was younger and I used to gather all of my stuffed animals, and I had like a teacher curriculum guide that I used to teach my stuffed animals. And he said, your job is not to sell anything, your job is to teach in this moment. And so I kind of developed like this quote that I learned financial lessons the hard way so you don't have to. And so
mm,
what began to be to me as just a way to make passive income, because I love concerts and I love to travel, and I've made this lifestyle in my head, and I'm my own personal little influencer. What began to be that journey for me became a nonprofit that helps millennial families in the Black community better leverage credit so that they can sustain generational wealth by way of home ownership. And so when he kept saying use what's in your hands, he didn't mean the perfect version of that. He didn't mean that I still wouldn't go through my own fair share of
Mhm.
credit challenges. He just meant that I've equipped you with this knowledge. And what's so funny about it, not to get long winded, but not what's so funny about it is I taught my first credit school lesson 3 weeks ago after taking off 2.5 years, and I remembered everything about at a 90%, rate. Like I didn't have to read anything. I was just so confident. I had already had the slides done. I didn't have to do any new slides. I'd already written a book, and so the things that God gave me the name the credit school before I had even propositioned this to be the credit school. That's what
Mm.
he meant by use what's in your hands. He's going to give you the very thing to equip you to the next phase and the next level. He's already
Mhm.
prepared you. You just have to be
Mhm.
obedient to do it. And
Yeah.
so when I walked in there, and then I recently did a class with UDC, and I was able to teach them, and I did my first vendor workshop. I literally didn't have to recreate anything. I just redesigned it so it was more cute. But and then got some shirts made, but he literally equipped me with everything, and it was all in my hands, and it all worked out, even down to the colors, the branding, everything. So to kind of wrap in short, that would be the lesson, like use what's in
Mhm.
your hands that God has already
Yeah.
equipped you with.
I love that because he everything we need he's already placed inside of us. The Bible,
Hmm.
when you were talking, I was thinking about that. The Bible lists so many stories, Gideon and Abraham and all these people that God
Hmm.
called to do big things that seemed Joshua. He called them to do
Hmm.
big things that seemed, especially for that time. Now we've seen people do things, but for that time, like God had them doing stuff. It's like, wait, anybody ever did this before? This is the first time everybody has anybody has done this. I think
Hmm.
when we're reading those stories that yeah, it may not be familiar to us, or it may be we know how it's going to end. But when they were going through it, they didn't know how it was going to end. They were
Exactly.
really trusting the process. And so I love
Hmm.
that you said that using what's in your hand and little in the hands of God becomes much. And so I love that you said that. Okay, and wrapping up our conversation, what drives you? What continues to drive you? And how do you maintain your inspiration and purpose? Because sometimes it gets hard to keep that inspiration going.
Think what drives me is knowing that I can make an impact, knowing that the credit school goes beyond me, knowing that it can be something that translates into something that makes a measurable impact. I tell people I work in data, and I worked in data analytics and finance. So the way that I track success is by data. And so one of the things that I'm currently working on is a curriculum to not only help millennial families, but I'm trying to eventually introduce a curriculum into K through 12 schools in my school district, and so that I can equip millennial children and the Gen Zers of the world to understand how to build and establish credit authority in their own right, and develop their credit report card. So I would definitely say that driving that impact, making it impact. And like I said earlier, the least of thee. How can I wake up every day to support the least of thee? Because when I was driving around, and this house was only but a lot in my imagination, God so forethought of me to say, you're going to be a homeowner. It just doesn't look like it right now. And so I go around and I say, how can I impact you? If I can impact one person, that ultimately was my goal for my last workshop. I didn't expect to make a sale, but I did. But I went into it saying if I could impact one person, it wasn't about virality to me. It wasn't about going viral, even though I accidentally have on multiple occasions on my platforms. But it's really about driving home the impact of what can I do to make a change in my community.
I love that. What key message do you hope that our audience takes away from your interview or our conversation today?
Use what's in your hands. That's
Yeah.
my favorite one. I actually was thinking about Exodus and that's I think a lot where I drive that message home when God was like, "What's in your hands?" And he was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"What? This? Like, you
Yeah,
think I'm gonna change the earth with this?" And he did.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's where I get a lot of that message from. And I kept trying to figure out. I was like, "Why do you keep sending me to this verse?" And he was like, "Because I'm trying to usher to you to use what's in your hands." And so a lot of people think that they have to, have these different exquisite shiny object
Mhm.
businesses when sometimes God only just needs you to make an impact, and the impact is not big to you, but it's big to the world. And so I just tell people, women, use what's in your hands and you will be surprised how God will magnify it.
I love that. I've been extremely inspired by this conversation. Cierra, thank you for sharing your story, your voice, and your wisdom today. Your journey is both inspiring and transformative, and we're grateful for the impact that you are making with the credit school and just your life and your story. To everyone watching, thank you for tuning in to Inspiring Voices. Stay connected for more stories that uplift, empower, and transform. Until next time, it won't be Inspiring Voices, but we have some other things coming up. Continue to walk in purpose, share your voice, and inspire the world around you.